What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and today I am on my own. I wanted to do this one on my own. We are still doing our Ghostbusters retrospective, our sort of full gamut of Ghostbusters fandom and the Ghostbusters movies. We've talked Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2 and Ghostbusters 2016, and today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife. I went to see the film, and there's going to be spoilers. I'm going to sort of put out the front, there are going to be spoilers as I talk about this film. So, if you haven't seen it yet, and you don't want to be spoiled, I'm sorry. You know, firstly, what the fuck are you doing? Get your ass out there and see it. Secondly, pause now, come back later when you've seen it. Have you gone? Good. Or are you back? Either way, we're going to be talking Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, obviously I've been running up to this. I've been watching all of the films. And I actually really enjoy all the films. And go back to the podcasts to look and to listen to my thoughts on those films. And so going into this, I had seen pretty much all the trailers. I had left out a couple of the sort of smaller bits and pieces. So I wanted to go in. I hadn't seen that last trailer, that last sort of 1 minute trailer. I didn't want to go in with much at all. So what did I think of this film? Up front, I have to say, I really enjoyed this film. I really did. It made me smile, it made me cry, made me laugh. I think there's a lot of good in this film. It's not perfect by any stretch. Definitely not perfect. But a lot of good. And the first thing is, there's a couple of things. It goes back to talking with Paul Gannon one of the past episodes. And he said two things. Firstly, there is Ghostbusters. There is the Ghostbusters movie, and then there are Ghostbusters movies, like the movies in which Ghostbusters are in. I get that, and this is what this is. It's an evolution. However, the other thing I thought about is no Ghostbusters movie has ever been the same. Like there's this idea of recapturing the tone or attitude or whatever of the first film. Doesn't exist. This that was lightning in a bottle. You got people at a certain age and certain agendas and all kinds of bits and pieces all came together in a certain pressure cooker and created possibly one of my favourite films. Brilliant. Ghostbusters 2 is a very different film. It's influenced by different things. It's coming as a bit more of a family film. It's influenced by things like the real Ghostbusters and merchandising and looking to sell toys and so on and so forth. So it has a slightly different slant. Okay, then you get 2016. 2016 is a very different slant. Paul Feig coming in to do something different. So it's this thing of like, don't be surprised if this film is something different. Like, of course it should be something different. Like, it's a different age. This film, to me, though, still captured that 80s feel, that 80s sort of tone, but not of Ghostbusters. It has Ghostbusters in it, and it has a Ghostbustery feel, but it felt like, and Stranger Things is a fair comparison I've heard that people make, I would still actually say there's more a feel of Goonies, the Monster Squad, The Gate, those sorts of films, 80s kid horror films or kid sort of adventure films that sort of tapped into that then. Look, this film is about kids. Like, it's an Amblin movie. Like, this feels like an 80s Amblin movie, like a Spielberg movie, and Paul Gannon got that spot on. And I wasn't sure if it's what I wanted, but it's what I got, and actually I kind of enjoyed that feel. Like, this felt like a film, and I've heard people saying this on social media, but it felt like a film that you can take your kids to. There's that thing of like, yeah, do I want to see a bunch of grumpy old men chasing ghosts? I would love to see the original cast on screen. We'll get to that, but I don't want them all the time because they'll be just creaky and old, and they clearly don't want to do it. Fine, bring me a new cast. This is a great way of rebooting. Does it mean this cast has to carry on? No. Like, there's stories to be told in different ways. But I honestly think that there is this is a really good jumping on point. And if they've manufactured it to be both a jumping on point and a nostalgia trip at the same time. And I think they did it perfectly. For the most part, there's a couple of quibbles I do have. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this film. It's an Amblin film. And I like those films. I love Monster Squad. I love Goonies still. Like they play a big part in my childhood. And still films I enjoy today. The story, though. So let's get to the story. This idea, it is a little contrived in places. This idea of, it has these things, but this idea of Egon giving up the Ghostbusters in the 90s and running off to sort of live in this sort of small town in the arse end of nowhere. It doesn't. It's a bit like he went crazy or something. Like he was driven by this thing of like the end of the world. When you see the previous films, 1 and 2, like that's not the Egon. Like, Egon did daft things. He tried to drill a hole in his head, or there's other things. But that this idea of him running off and leaving the Ghostbusters, especially leaving Ray, does not compute. It just doesn't seem to be in character. Now we don't know what happens after Ghostbusters 2. There's a stretch, and fine, but it just felt out of character. But we'll get to that. But it's fine. I'm happy to accept it, and maybe it'll be padded out in in whatever. I'd love them to have done a novelisation of this. They won't. They haven't, which is a real shame because all the other films have got novelisations. But there you go. But yeah, it just felt weird. But it still kicks off this idea. You're going out from you're leaving the city. All the other films have been based in the city and going to this small town. That I like. Again, you're bringing this film back into that sort of idea of small town America. This idea of sort of like picturesque Americana. Like a diner forms a large part of the story in this film. This idea of like wooden farmhouses and large open fields and a mine. All this feels sort of again tapping into Stephen King ideas. This idea of sort of middle America and sort of like stuff happening there rather than the big cities. I kind of like that. It makes a lot of sense. And so to see it in that respect, I like the idea of this story being centered in a small town. You can, there's only so many times you can have it in New York, and if you're going to have these kids as the cast, which we'll get to in a second, then you need it somewhere else. You can't have a New York cop stopping a bunch of kids and sort of shooting them, because that's what would happen. But yeah, so having it in a small town, I like. Having it then tied into Ivo Shandor, I absolutely love, because it makes complete sense. There's obviously nuggets dropped about Ivo Shandor in the first film, and even as a kid, not as a kid maybe, but as an adult, as I've grown up and I've watched the film, I've had questions about Ivo Shandor. It's like, where did he come from? Like, they say in the first film how he made the girders for the building out of this selenium, this material. And there's always a question: where the hell did he get them from then? Like, if he was rich enough and powerful enough to build this building and construct it, like, where was he getting his cash from? How was he doing this? And this film goes back and it's like, oh yeah, no, like this is the kind of thing that happened. Like, they set up a town around a mine, and then the town sort of grows from there. I literally live in a village. The village I live in existed solely to support miners 200, 300 years ago. And it's still here. Like, the mine is long gone, probably in the last sort of 50 years, 60 years. But the village remains, and that's one of those things, the same thing. Like, this thing, the town was built by Shandor and then existed beyond him. And so that felt real to me as well, which was interesting. A town sort of hanging on through different things, just existing in this existence. And one of the characters is Celeste O'Connor. She plays Lucky. She actually says, like, I am fourth generation. Somerville, like, it's that, and that felt, families are trapped in this thing, that you get these families that do sort of exist in these sort of like perpetual existences in small towns. So, excuse me, it felt cool. So I like the atmosphere, I'm liking the environment, and I'm liking that it's a continuation of nuggets dropped in the first film. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. And the way it's found like this idea of sort of like, so I saw someone. This is the thing is, I'm going to go to the part, but I like the small little nuggets in the house, like the Egon's farmhouse, the dirt farmer. So but there's all these little moments. However, someone pointed out to me that it's a lot like Poltergeist. Again, Steven Spielberg influenced film, and I definitely feel that there's those influences in this, and that's not a bad thing. Like, when you find out that the house is haunted by the ghost of Egon, and it plays chess, it moves light bulbs, it directs the ghost of Egon not appearing, not materializing, but directing McKenna Grace's character, Phoebe, to all these different things around the table, around the house, like directing her through the house, using the PKE meter. Like, I loved that. Like, that to me felt like a great sort of like, oh, that's a kind of scene that you would have seen in the 80s. Like, that's a film. That's the thing I would have seen in a film like Monster Squad. Like, it's not huge special effects. Just you could easily do it with practical effects, but it felt like there was some humour to it. It felt funny, like thanking a light shade, or acknowledging what it's showing you. So I thought all that was actually, again, really good. And so this idea of it building up and these kids taking on the Ghostbusters, like, it felt sort of natural. Like, there's things in this film that are contrived, finding certain things, getting away with things. Like, you have to sort of accept that the parents are sort of what I like to call like movie neglectful. Like, they're just, it's a good job that the parents aren't around for this. But they're verging on negligence, but it's a good job. So it's fine. It's sort of atypical of certain types of films, especially films with kids when they go off to do these things. And they've aged them a specific kind of age. But yeah, there's things like them getting away with. Again, finding a field in the middle of the arse end of nowhere, and again just blasting things. Like, I've done that. I had an air pistol and an air rifle when I was a kid, and you could go out and do that kind of thing. So again, it sort of makes sense. I'm happy to go with that. It felt like Scooby-Doo-ish. It's the kids. This thing of kids on the grand adventure. Again, you sort of can wear thin as an adult, and there are moments in this story where you're like, okay, like kids taking on a god towards the end feels a little beyond the pale. But because of everything I've enjoyed up to that point, everything that's built up, and I've gone on with these characters, I'm enjoying the characters, I'm enjoying the sort of the environment and the atmosphere, I just go with it at the end, and it's good to do that, because the finale of this film is a bit silly, and there's several moments that sort of are a little bit heavy-handed, and weirdly, because it's been filmed on location in a number of ways. Like, the whole town of Somerville is clearly, it's all filmed outside, and the sets are great, and outside the house has got filled with this light, and it feels like a real house. So it's a real shame that when Zool appears at the end, when Gozer appears at the end, and it all pushes through the rock, and then Ecto 1, they go in Ecto 1, and they're sort of like to take her on, or to sort of like have them chase or whatever. The finale, it sort of shifts, and that bit really feels like a soundstage, like really badly, as does the proper finale where they go back to the farmhouse, and there's shots, and it's this weird thing of there are sort of like mid-range shots, and you can see it's a farm, and it looks very much sort of like on location, and then it goes back to the action, and it feels like a soundstage. I'm not sure why. There's like a lighting, or there's just something, the way it's done feels, and I understand why it was filmed on a soundstage. Like, there's some practical effects, technical effects. I'm sure there were sort of limitations of things they had to do that could only be done on a soundstage. Not a problem, fine. But I don't know, it just felt like it, that made it feel a little cheap towards the end, and that sort of bugged me a little. Not enough to put me off. It's a very minor nitpick, but it was noticeable that Gozer on her throne, its throne, looks like a soundstage. In fact, it looked at one. There are two shots in particular that when McKenna Grace is working, when Phoebe's walking up, that it looks so much like a soundstage, or so staged, that it actually reminded me of a ride or like a show you would see at like Disneyland or Universal Studios. It looked that crap. I don't know why. It really took me out of the film at one point. I reconciled it. It's not a problem. So the story's good. I like the story. It works well for me. And then you get sort of like the payoff. So let's sort of talk about. We'll talk about that in a little bit actually, because I want to talk about the cast. But the payoff, obviously, the original cast turn up in enough of a cameo that I like. It was at first I was like, literally, as we're getting close to the end of the finale, like when they go and confront Gozer, I was like, okay, are the original four? Oh, not the original four, but are the three remaining going to turn up at this point? Like I'm counting down, like and so they only get like a minor. They only get like a minor cameo. Like they partake in the action, but it's it isn't like a meaty cameo. But on reflection, it's enough because it's not about them. And that's actually a really good point to make, is that this film isn't about them. Like, you've spent this whole film following these kids and the families around them, and so to see if the whole third act had then just been taken up by the original Ghostbusters coming back, I think I would have felt conflicted about that, because they'd have just taken over, and I'm like, hang on, what about their story? And so it's just enough that they come in to sort of like to add, but the day is saved by the kids. And so I like that. I appreciate that. So I kind of like it. And let's be fair, like these guys are in their 70s. They're pretty sure they got paid well for this and enjoyed sort of catching up. And Ernie Hudson, Winston Zeddemore gets his due finally. Sort of like this idea of like he went off, got himself educated, and became a finance magnate. So we'll get onto this thing about my predictions for the future. But I like that. I like that as a point that he actually went off and made good and became sort of the most successful of the four. So. But there is another cameo, and that's the ghost of Egon coming back. And obviously you knew it was there because the ghost of Egon, it's clear that there's a ghost of Egon in the house, like directing McKenna Grace to fix the proton packs and the traps and the PKE and doing all the other bits and pieces. And it even sort of helps, it unknowingly helps the Finn Wolfhard's character fix the car. So it's there. Like I was like, okay, it's going to happen. Are they going to have a CGI, like a Force ghost of Egon? Is that what they're going to have? And again, as the film progressed, in my head, I was a little conflicted, thinking, I don't know if I want that to happen. I don't know. But then when it does happen, and the way it's done, and the CGI on it, the mocap and the sort of the deep fake, whatever you want to call it, is so fucking good. It's so good. The moment like McKenna's sort of like she's fighting off Gozer, she's got the proton wand is firing off, and then this hand appears to help steady her, and keep her steady. And it pans round. I'm getting choked thinking about it. It pans round, and Egon is there supporting his granddaughter, and it's just brilliant. And it looks spot on. It looks like an aging Harold Ramis. They don't have him speak like he hasn't morphed into one of these other cartoony ghosts. He looks like Harold Ramis, and I think it works in that thing of look. It doesn't have to look spot on photorealistic, so it sort of bypasses the nature of the uncanny valley, because he's a Force ghost, so he looks fine. It looks good. And so, they give him a bit of physicality. He's able to help and do stuff. And so I absolutely loved the fact that you do get all four of them stood up together. And, you get Harold. And this felt like a good send-up. It honoured Harold Ramis and Egon. So I thought that cameo and that appearance at the end was fantastic. I absolutely loved it, and it meant a lot to a lot of fans, and it meant a lot to me, and I appreciate them doing that in a tasteful way. So let's quickly talk about the cast, and just run through them really. So they've got the kids, McKenna Grace, Finn Wolfhard, Logan Kim, and Celeste O'Connor as the four sort of main kids. And I would say, weirdly, the older two of the two kids, Celeste O'Connor and Finn Wolfhard, are so much of a muchness when it comes to sort of like youth actors or young adult teenage actors. They are perfectly serviceable. I would happily watch them in a sequel. They are fine. Celeste O'Connor in particular is, she has a confidence. She seems fine on screen. She sort of interacts with everyone. Fine is all I can say, really. Like, there's nothing bad. There's just no pizzazz. There's no zing there. She just... they tried to sort of have her as this sort of like, she's got a bit of an edge, but she's cheeky. Like, when Trevor goes into prison or into the cell, and she's sort of like, you gotta hide this, quick. Like, they're trying to play it, she's like pranky or she's got an edge or whatever. Like, and I never quite believe it. Like, it never sort of comes across as being legit. Like, it feels forced, and so that was a little disappointing. And it stays that way sort of throughout the rest of the film. That she's like, she feels like a character. She's the one that she feels most like a character, where they've gone, oh, right, we've got to have sort of, a character be this thing, tick these boxes. And I feel that she gets a few things lumped on her which become a bit clunky, which is unfortunate, because there are other scenes where she's actually pretty good, but there's others where it feels clunky. She gets a good ending. Like, her to be fair, her stuff at the end is good. Like, she gets possessed, and they work all that stuff in really well. So that's not to say she's not that she doesn't get her due. And again, like with Finn Wolfhard, like, I've seen him, he's done Stranger Things and all this other stuff. Like, so I often feel like, yeah, he's fine, he's good. I've liked him in things, and I like him in this. He's fine. And again, it's like he just doesn't have. He feels awkward and gangly as a teenager, and that's fine. I expect that. But then they also want him to have like certain other traits that sort of like never quite land. Like, they want him to be sort of a little bit more confident and stuff, and it's or a bit snarky. And it seems like they're never quite sure. Do they want him to become? Do they want him to be the Bill Murray? Is he supposed to be sort of like the Bill Murray character kind of this piece? And so I'm curious as to sort of like how they put that together. I'm working through them in my sort of like how much I like them, but again, like Logan Kim as podcast. Firstly, any character that sort of acknowledges themselves as a podcast and calls himself podcast is all right by me. But he's cool. That kid is really funny. Like, he's got some great comedy timing. He's charismatic. He's charming. He never quite, sort of with kids actors, there's that sort of fine line of shifting from sort of like charmingly cheeky to irritating. It's easier to cross that line in real life than it is in film. But he manages to sort of like tread that board of being irritating without being irritating. Like, he can be a little annoying, but it's never that I don't want him on screen. I actually really enjoy his presence, and he is fun. He's funny, and it's clear that he's doing well. The only time again that I find he not gets wasted, but like gets given something, it's the finale. The finale sort of generally works, but gets populated by moments that start to bug me. And his moment when he's attacking the mini puffs with the zapper, and they're all exploding on him to cover him in marshmallow. It feels that was one of those. We'll get into fan service in a little bit, but that felt like one of those moments where I was just like, ugh, this doesn't work. Like, this thing just feels stupid. But then I saw kids laughing at it, so I was like, okay, this isn't for me. But it felt Disney. That moment felt like a Disney show, CW show. It felt like a sitcom-y moment, and it didn't feel authentic. And I was hoping that the mini puffs would be a bit more of a threat, so they'd actually play a part in doing some more damage, or at least being a risk to him. And the final one is McKenna Grace. And I will say this, I cannot say enough good things about McKenna Grace. She's an absolutely fabulous little actress, and that sounds really patronising. But before I saw this, I've seen him in a couple of things, I can't remember, but I saw recently Handmaid's Tale season 3. and spoilers for that as well, but she appears as a character as a wife, a young wife, and it's clear that she has been sexually abused by this husband character. Like, she was forced into this thing, and then she obviously, you know, her rage and her anger comes through in that, and she does some things in that are quite, you know, shocking. But she was really good in that, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, you are great. But, like, you know, so I'm seeing you as this sort of like serious and dark, damaged character. You know, is that what you're brought in to do? I haven't seen Little Women, so I couldn't make that comparison. But then I watch her in this, and I think she's funny, she's charming. You know, she's playing a completely different character. She's got like chops. She's fantastic. Like, she carries a lot of this film, and her charisma does a lot of the work. Like, she on screen, like, you know, she knows how to play things and when to sort of pull back on certain jokes and that sort of thing. Like, I think she's just very skilled, and I'm hoping that, you know, we are seeing the start of a long career for McKenna Grace. And, you know, she's one of those actresses that often you see these, and someone pointed out to me about kid actors don't usually have a success rate, but I'm hoping that we'll see her in the line and she'll be like, you know, here's her getting her Oscar or whatever. Like, she's fantastic. So well done for taking on this role. And you see her as she is the progeny of Egon Spengler, and she's fantastic. So the cast are really good for the kids. They work well. And again, I'm thinking back to like Goonies and Monster Squad, and it ticks those boxes as well. You know, sort of like the nerds, boom, boom, cool kids, yeah, boom, boom. Sort of like the outsider coming in to join the group, boom, yeah, all that was there. And so, yeah, I mean, if you seriously go back and watch Goonies or Monster Squad, or even like the Castle of the Gate, or there's a couple of others. I can't think of them, but like there's a formula for the different characters that sit within these groups. So it works for me. It really worked. The adult characters, mainly sort of focusing on Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon, slightly more mixed bag. There's a definite sort of reliance on Paul Rudd being Paul Rudd at times, and I often like that. I enjoy it. However, in this, it's sort of, there's a couple of occasions where it's a little bit too Paul Rudd. You know, it's a bit Ruddy much, if I'm honest. It's fine. Again, it's fine. It's just, I think maybe I've seen a lot of him. There's a bit of saturation, but he's perfectly serviceable and funny, and he still has charisma and charm and stuff. I'm happy to have him on screen. But it's when you get to that third act, I struggle with the third act, because when he then takes on the sort of like the Lois Tully, the Vince Clortho possession, and everything like that, from that sort of point on, it feels a little clunky. And I think that's the same for Carrie Coon. Carrie Coon, again, feels like she's perfectly acceptable. She's sort of like the put-upon mum. I completely understand where she's coming from for a large portion of this, why she hates Egon, why she hates science, and she has all this stuff, and why she struggles with the kids. It all sort of works. And then it's sort of like that third act starts to feel a little clunky. Like, her possession makes sense, but then she's got possessed by Zool, is fine. You know, they sort of have this thing. But then when she's not possessed by Zool, but she's still in the sort of like the Zool clothing and stuff, like she feels like a fifth wheel on this situation. And then, we've got to give her things to do. And, you know, where she's been sort of like a certain character for the majority of the film, there's just moments in that finale when they're just not entirely sure how to use her. And it's this thing of fine. Like, she is fine, but there's others excelling. But that third act is definitely saved by others. Like, again, like, the plan is good. McKenna Grace is fantastic in it. In fact, she's the bit that saves it. Like, she is the centre of that finale, and she's fantastic. And then obviously when the original guys come in, it sort of elevates it again for me. But that finale feels a little clunky around the farm, when they go back to the dirt farm, and this idea of capturing Gozer in all these traps. And again, the depiction of Gozer in this is fantastic. Like, it really feels like a continuation of 1984. Love it. I love the fact that the suit is now like this sort of like weird mesh flesh part of her, as well as the fact that when she doesn't, they've now confirmed that she needs to have this combination of Zool and Vince Clortho to become whole. So when one of those is trapped and taken away, she becomes this sort of like wraith character stalking across the ground. It looks fantastic. Like, it's great character design. I absolutely love that. So I loved all that exposition stuff. So that is great. It's just the fact that that's it. And even having it on the farm, I was quite excited to have this thing on the farm. It sort of felt like a good bringing it down to earth kind of thing. But there's something about that finale that just feels clunky. And it's hard to put my finger on it, and I may have to reflect on it for a little bit longer. I'm definitely going to see this film again. But yeah, that third act, that finale, just feels like a little bit clunky. The third act in itself as a whole, fine. It's just that finale, the grand finale, feels a little clunky and not quite put together properly. I think I'm trying in my head. It's the pacing of, like, we talk about the choreography. It's what I'm trying to think of in my head. You think of the choreography of a big fight. So think about an action movie or a sword and sandals kind of movie. Like, there's going to be the choreography, the fight choreography of, like, two guys atop of a hill sword fighting, clang clang clang, or even Star Wars. You have the choreography of the moments, where they'll go up and down and round, and they'll fight up a flight of stairs, or they'll fight through this or whatever. Car chase is a similar thing. There's that choreography. They're going to do here, they're going to go here, and these things are going to interact. That's what a finale has, and this finale just, like, it felt very much like there was a lot going on, but not a great deal of it mattered. Like, it was all sort of like, okay, we've got to do, here's the plan, here's what we've got to do. We've got to get tempt Gozer back to the farm so we can actually trap her in these masses of traps in the ground. This is how we're going to do it. All right, fine, brilliant, love that, get on with it. And then when it happens, it's a bit sort of like, we're going to sort of spring all these traps on her, like the door bursts open and Lucky comes out and starts shooting it, and then the side of Ecto bursts open and they use the gunner seat and they're trying to do that, and it's all like, it feels stagey is the best way I can put it. It feels very stagey. It doesn't feel like, it feels like a plan, but the choreography, the way it's been put into practice, feels stagey, and doesn't sort of have the punchiness that I think it needed, until sort of like, if they feel like they're all down, and that's when the guys come in and it sort of like gets lifted up again. And that's not to say that, I'm waiting for the guys to come back. The original Ghostbusters saved it. They sort of do, but it almost feels like that, right? We're going to have this kid's plan is going to go awry to be saved because it feels so stagey, but they've done other things that haven't done that, and so it sort of feels a bit, I don't know, it feels forced. So anyway, that's the thing I'll say is the cast are really is good to fine, or fine, good to excellent, in my opinion. So enjoyed that. The other thing I'm sort of just thinking about before we sort of start to roll is this idea of nostalgia. There was a big thing about this and saying whether or not this taps into too much nostalgia. And I've heard both sides of the argument online and in reviews. Too much, too little, or just enough, whatever. In my opinion, it's one of those that this film has some fantastic, subtle nostalgia that if you've never seen the original film, doesn't matter. It's in the background. If you go when they get into the house, there's the pile of symmetrically stacked books. No one stacked books like that. You get these other things when they're going around, the spores, molds, and fungus, or all these little bits and pieces. I can't think of one, but even like the pictures in the background. Apparently, even the toaster from Ghostbusters 2 is in the kitchen. There's bits and pieces like that. Like, as you go through this film, there are lots of little Easter eggs to sort of pick out, and that's great. There's also ones that are in your face a little bit, and that's the problem. And the biggest problem for me is the music. And the use of the original Elmer Bernstein score is a heavy-handed mess, in my opinion. One of the things that becomes evident, and a good score is used to score a scene. So, when it's being written, the composer will watch the film, he'll have this thing in his head, and then he'll write it, and then they'll record it as they're watching it. So they'll have those inflections, and everything. So like when you are listening back to the score, if you've ever had a film, and there's some great examples of this, but if you ever sort of like, if you've watched a film and you love a film, and then you listen to the score, you will hear certain inflections and little notes, even the minor things, not just there's big rousing moments, but those little things that you can go, oh, that's this scene. I can picture it in my head. It's really evoking that emotion in me, and that's what it's there for. And the Elmer Bernstein score was written to score the 1984 Ghostbusters. And so, when you take a legacy score like that and you want to blend it into your film, and let's talk about blending, right? Others have done it. Danny Elfman did it particularly well with like the Superman, the John Williams, and his own Batman score into like the Justice League, where he sort of like blends them in so you hear those notes or whatever. Star Wars did it. John Williams does it fantastically with blending in old score to sort of, Luke's theme or the Empire March or whatever, Imperial March. Blends them in to sort of use them again to let you know, oh, this is this character, or like, oh, no, they live in the same thing, they do this, they whatever. Using it very, very well. Legacy sequels, some have been fantastic. This, it's literally just like press button, CD play, and it plays a sort of music that seems completely from, a completely different part of the film. Like there's the moment they're chasing down Chomper, or Muncher, whatever it's called, the blue the blue ghost. And they just start playing in that chase sections of the Bernstein score for when they're chasing down Slimer in the first film. And it's just like it's this like someone coming out with a rubber sledgehammer and just smashing you in the face and being like, remember this? This is when this happened. Yeah, I get that. But blend it in. Don't just turn on the score. And it happens again and again, and it took me out of the film. It really was a problem for me by the end of the film. It's just like, the score for this film is crap. Lazy is what it is. There's moments where it's fine, it's good, but the use of the original Elmer Bernstein score, is crap, and it's really badly done. I found it irritating. So yeah, it's too heavy-handed. So that was my big thing. The nostalgia is good. The fact it's Ecto 1, not Ecto 1A. The fact that the proton packs look great. The use of the new stuff, like the little RC trap, was a great little thing. The gunner seat, all those bits and pieces, and using the suits and all that other stuff. And then obviously the return of the original Ghostbusters and stuff. Fantastic. I think the nostalgia sort of visually is great. Is really, really good. It's just thingy. Even like great moments, like spoilers, since full of spoilers, when Gozer finally returns, they find obviously Ivo Shandor has sort of like embalmed him, done something, I don't know, cast a spell to be sort of interred until Gozer returns. And then when he does, he's like, mistress, and she just comes and just rips him in half. I loved that scene. Like, that was a great little moment that made me chuckle. That was just sort of like, not just harkening back to the first film, but was a good sort of like, this thing of like the real end of Ivo Shandor. So that's where I was at with that. So the nostalgia works on screen. The music is a real mistake. So that's the film for me in many respects. I think I've talked about a lot. So there's two things I want to talk about. Where does this rank with the other films? So I did really, really love this film. I will definitely be buying this film. It will be in rotation. To me, I think this just nudges out Ghostbusters 2. Now, I love Ghostbusters 2, but I have problems with some of that film as well. It's a really good fun film. There's elements of laziness in that film as well. But this film has, because of that Amblin sort of feel, there's certain things in it that I really enjoy. I think this film just nudges out Ghostbusters 2. So for me, and I love all four of these, like it's literally sort of in some cases like a gnat's wing, a gnat's bollock between them. But it goes Ghostbusters 2016 is in at number 4. And again, a good film, enjoyed it. It's got the good humour, bit patchy, overstays its welcome in some parts, and the cast, it's basically held together by Leslie Jones and Kate McKinnon. Then you'll get Ghostbusters 2. which I still love. I think it's fantastic. Underuses Ernie Hudson. Has some issues in sort of like, you know, matching the pacing and being a replay of the first film, but sort of like being a little sillier. Not many. Then I think it's Afterlife, and I think again, like if they just sorted out the music and tweaked that finale, like this film would be even further away from Ghostbusters 2. They're a bit slightly interchangeable, I would say. And then Ghostbusters, the 1984 is the original. So that's my listings. Now, future. Let's talk about the future. Potential for the future. So this film ends with 2 post-credit scenes. One or 3 sort of. Like one's a final nod. It says, you know, thank you. It says for Harold at the end, and it goes into an image of Ecto being driven over the bridge. I don't know which bridge it is, but a bridge back into New York, and you get the original music. Like that is the best use of the original music. In fact, that probably should have been the only use of the original music in this film. Because that would have been an absolute ball-busting little moment if that was the only time you got some of that music from the Elmer Bernstein score. Like, that should have been the way it's done. And so that's great. And then it goes into the thing with Sigourney Weaver and Bill Murray, which is nice. It's a retaking of the thing with the cards and the electrocution. Happy with that. Nice little thing. You're never going to see Bill Murray again in a Ghostbusters film. All right? Accept that. You're never going to see Sigourney Weaver again in the Ghostbusters film. Accept that. Move on. All right? Done. So that's my first prediction for the future. Who is going to come back? I think we're going to come back and you're going to have Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson. And here's how it's going to work. They're taking it back because the last post-credit scene is Ernie Hudson back in the firehouse. There is a continuity error there, but that's, you know, because they think it's turned into a Starbucks. Clearly isn't. Ernie Hudson appears to have bought it because he's now a rich financial wizard. And so he is going to redo Ecto 1. But here's what I think is going to happen. They are going to sort of reinstate this thing as a minor thing to try and build these things back up, back in the firehouse, looking at this thing. And I think they're going to have, if you've ever seen the Extreme Ghostbusters, Ray is going to come in as a bit of a mentor kind of character for this next load of cast, which probably or may include Paul Rudd. We shall see. I think if they bring back Paul Rudd, you will see him in costume. You will see him in a flight suit in the next film. I think you will have McKenna Grace back, and I think you will have Finn Wolfhard back. Will Celeste O'Connor be back? I don't know. May replace her with someone else, but she'll see. But I think you'll get at least a smidge of this cast. But then you are going to get a wider cast that will make up an adult ghost-busting team that will be sort of mentored by Ray and financed by Winston. And so those two will act as a thingy. Now they did show, because it shows that they go back to the firehouse and it shows you the containment unit and the red light is flashing. So there is an issue to be resolved. Don't know what it is, but let's go find out. But I honestly think, I hope this film gets a sequel. I think it will be back in New York, which is good. Or if they were to do it between New York and Somerville, I think that would be quite cool. You've now got 2 locations, you know, that sort of become important to lore. But let's see how that plays out. But that's what I think is going to happen. You're going to get a new roster where you're going to have, say, maybe 3 new adult characters to make up the 4, with Paul Rudd as the 4 adult Ghostbusters. You will then get support from McKenna Grace, Finn Wolfhard, possibly Celeste O'Connor, and they'll be mentored by Ray and Winston. That's my thinking. That's what I'm hoping. It'll be interesting. Let's see what comes of it. There's already talks of an animated film. Has been talked about. I've been wanting an animated film for forever. More comics. Like, if you're not going to give me a novelization of this film, give me a bloody comic adaptation. That's what I want to see. Yeah, I think there's so much more potential from this franchise. Like, I absolutely love this film. It really gave me all the feels. Yes, it had problems. You know what I'm like. I do like to nag on about things. But I legit love this film. You know, there's little moments in this film, like one of the ones that Max from the show, Max points out, and I spotted it. They got the bog-eyed ghost from the Kenner toys turned into a ghost in this film. That's awesome. Love that. So yes, Ghostbusters Afterlife. if you haven't seen it and you've just listened to all that, I hope you go see it. Go support it. You now know pretty much everything that happens. But still, it's a good film. I've really enjoyed it. But they're my thoughts. There you go, sort of 40 odd minutes of my thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have got one last episode to go out for the Ghostbusters. And that is going to be, in the next episode, it'll be me talking with Channeling Spirit from Devin from Channeling Spirit on YouTube. In the next episode, talking about cosplay and other bits and pieces. He'll be the last stand for this Ghostbusters run. So I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been fantastic doing this. I've really enjoyed talking about Ghostbusters for a month. And we may come back here again, talk specifically about real Ghostbusters. Now, what else are we doing? Is there anything else? Well, we do, of course, appreciate everybody's support. If you're listening, we just love you. We love all of our listeners. Thank you very much for being here. I say we, it's me. I am the 20th Century Geek. I love you. But we need some help keeping the lights on in 20th Century Towers, and we love all your support. So, look at your device. You'll probably you could be listening to this on a phone, I expect. Most people are. Or a laptop, but go to your podcast catching, platform, whatever it is, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, whatever it is, Audible. Go on there, leave a review. Really appreciate it. I'll tell you what, if anyone... I'm going to do this for Christmas, actually. But if you can show me a picture, all right, tweet me a picture of your review, you'll get a shout out on the show, and then in December I will pick the best one and we'll start sending out some gifts. I think that sounds like a fair thing to do. So tweet me, and that's at 20th Century Geek on Twitter. Find me and send me a picture of you reviewing this podcast on the platform with hashtag review, and then let me know which platform you're reviewing it on. So, other things, ladies and gentlemen, if you really like what we're doing as well, don't forget we do have a Patreon. We have a Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/20CG Media. That's 20th Century Geek Media. That's our wider big brother. And on that, we have a weekly podcast where myself and Julian Darius from Stories Out of Time and Space talk about the trekking through the Twilight Zone. Every week, we trek through the Twilight Zone. And then every month I do 30 minutes thoughts, different bits and pieces. Every month we do a poll and I talk about something for 30 minutes. And then every quarter we then have a guest on to do Creators Corner, something very creative. And this month, sneaky, I may have some Ghostbusters related guest on. So that's the hope. I'm working on it. I'm not going to say who it is. I'll be promoting that soon. But anyway, go check it out. There's a link below. Go check out our podcast Patreon. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening, and I shall see you on the next episode.